Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. My name is Mo, and I'll be sitting in the host chair again since we are talking with Dr. Lem Usita. Dr. Lem, what's up?
Yes, sir. Always great to be on the show with you. Looking forward to having this conversation with you. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, today we're talking about leadership lesson number 27, personal leadership development. And let me tell you, this one probably strikes at the heart for me more than any of them because I'm all about do it. If you screw up, it's your fault, get better. And so
Yeah,
when I started reading this article, I thought, okay, this is the stuff that people need to hear. So
yeah.
why don't you just tell us about what inspired you to write this and what it's about?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things that you can read about in the leadership literature. When you read leadership books, it tells you all the things that you need to do, but it doesn't tell you everything that you need to do. I think part of it, well, a big part of this particular lesson has to do with the emotional and the personal side of things. And so, we all have different frustrations in leadership, and it's just helping each individual leader work through their particular frustration and how they can grow from it.
I love it. Let's start by talking about what every leader goes through, which is frustration. Why is it so powerful to start with what frustrates us about the leaders that we follow?
Yeah, I like that. The first thing about that is it gets you to reflect on leadership that you've experienced. And so you're thinking through leadership practice, either your leadership practice or more specifically the leaders that you've worked with. And then the second thing is if you've experienced any frustration in leadership, there's always this personal and emotional connection to that experience. It tells you something about yourself, a possible trigger, or it causes you to ask, why am I frustrated about this? It also shows you something about your leadership, and I'm sure we'll unpack that in, the next couple of minutes.
Can reflection on bad leadership actually be a roadmap, though, to discovering our own leadership values?
Yeah, I really think it can. It shows you something about yourself. And because you have a frustration, there is something there about that frustration that highlights something happening inside of you, which then connects to what you value in leadership or what you should value in leadership.
What are some of the negative traits you've heard from students or clients?
The most common thing is when one gets frustrated. Like just people saying, "Man, I'm just so frustrated at my leader," or "I'm just so frustrated with leadership." And there are a lot of times where you hear the us and them kind of language, like in an organization, they will other leadership as if they're far away, like they do this to us. And so there could be many reasons for this. The leader that's leading might just be unaware of his leadership frustrating the team members, or they just don't care. That's also a possibility. But they're the
Yeah.
leader, you know what I mean? So they're the leader and they're going to do what they do. Now, I think this lesson is more for the team member and those that are watching leadership. The team member might just, might be frustrated by that situation, but they also may need to just grow up or mature, or maybe they're just in a really tough situation. But no matter what the frustration is, the frustration still highlights something that's happening inside of you. And so whether the leader's just unaware, they don't care, or the team member just needs to grow up and mature, like that frustration is still there and it shows you something that you need to change.
How can leaders avoid becoming critical or cynical?
Yeah, so when you focus on things that you can't change, for instance, the leader that you're working for or another person, then it's always going to lead to becoming critical and cynical. But I think part of the lesson is if you could focus on yourself and you can get better and make the change that you can make, then you can kind of avoid being critical or being cynical because you're growing and you're developing your leadership.
Why do you encourage leaders to create an exhaustive list of negative traits and not just a short one?
Now, this list sounds like it's about the leader because the article says make a list of how leaders have, what their negative traits are and how they impact you. But it's really not about the leader. This exhaustive list is about you and why you get frustrated and why you see it as negative. So write down as many things as you can that frustrate you so that you can get a bigger picture of yourself. And this list acts like a mirror to show you, to just show you like here are all the negative things that you see. Why do you get frustrated about that? Then what can you change?
So, what typically happens when somebody takes the time to actually make this list and do it thoroughly?
So what you're able to do is you're able to reflect on behaviors that are damaging to leadership and how they affect the leadership like culture and how it affects your productivity. And so again, it's just a mirror to help you see like this is the things that I see are negative. These are the things that frustrate me. What can I do to change?
So, have you ever had a coaching client maybe experience a breakthrough from using this part of the process?
Yes, I've had many clients that I've worked with and just many team members that I've worked with. And when you can help a team member better understand their leader, then they learn how to navigate their leader. They learn how to lead up. It helps them to avoid the frustrations that their leaders might, bring upon them. And so showing a team member how leadership functions and how they work really helps them just to navigate leadership.
So, is this something that leaders do regularly, or is it a one time exercise?
I think it needs to be revisited, and I think this list needs to be part of your reflective and evaluation process. So as you're thinking through your leadership practice, as you're reflecting on things that happen, you can always come back to this list, and it helps drive some of your values. So, it reminds you of your values.
Yeah, and it really sounds simple, like just don't do these things. But
Right.
why is that actually one of the hardest parts of leadership?
I think it's really hard because it's emotional, right? There isn't so much written about the emotional side of leadership. It's hard because sometimes you can't control it. Sometimes, there's some been examples this week. Sometimes it makes you tweet something that, you'll delete later. You know what I mean? It's hard because it's hardwired into who you are. And so as I thought about it, there aren't really too many leadership books on how to deal with the emotional side of things. But then when you look at downfall of leaders, it's always going to be something that they did emotionally. They're reacting. It's going to be some kind of character thing that they weren't able to control. And so that's kind of the focus of this lesson.
What's your advice to leaders when they recognize they're doing the very things that they said that they would never do?
Man, it's sometimes hard to just take a look at the big thing that you need to change. So make micro changes. That's part of the reason why we're doing this lesson. You're writing down this exhaustive list. You break down the behaviors and the triggers, and you make those smaller changes first.
Can you share a personal example where you notice yourself slipping into one of these negative traits? And then what did you do to course correct?
In most meetings, I'm pretty quiet, but when I speak up, I'm not, I'm typically get pretty passionate about what I'm saying, and sometimes I may not always be kind. And so I wear an Apple Watch, and I learned this years ago, and I would regularly check my heart rate in meetings, right? And so, like, I wouldn't necessarily feel triggered and I wouldn't necessarily feel emotional about a thing, but then I'd look at my heart rate and I'd have an elevated heart rate. So even though I wasn't necessarily aware or conscious of it, my body, the heart rate doesn't lie. You know what I mean? If I have an elevated heart rate, then I need to keep my mouth shut because then I'm going to say something that, I may regret later or I may not necessarily mean. The other thing that I do is when my heart rate is elevated, I will take a breath before I say something just to calm my nervous system. But yeah, I mean, I do it for myself.
Self awareness is really important. And so, for leaders, how does self awareness play into them making sure that their negative behaviors don't creep back in?
I think self-awareness is a great place to start, like we've been talking about, and then it gives you a starting point to just break down why is it that I feel this way, and then as you start processing through it, as you start developing, your coping strategies, they can become a habit, and then those habits can turn into a practice so that things don't creep back in. So learning how to again calm your nervous system is going to help you so much in leadership.
So, enough of the negative, let's talk about the positive. So, once you know what not to do, how do you build yourself into the kind of leader that you do want to be?
Yeah, and this lesson focuses on not doing the things that frustrate you as a leader. Again, you write all those things down. So the flip side would just be simply to do the things that aren't negative, right? So there's you're going to be writing down those negative things, and then to just simply, flip it and do those kinds of things, to be encouraging, to communicate more, to, whatever it is that frustrates you, just do the opposite of that so that you're not doing the negative thing and you're doing the positive.
If leadership is all about people, what are some of the practical ways that leaders can develop traits like empathy, communication, trustworthiness?
This list helps you to be aware of the negative things, but then it also helps you to build the list of the positive things. So that's why, I mean, the negative things is just so much easier to identify than the positive things. And you take that list of negative things, and then you can build a list of positive things to do, and then you could develop those practices based off of the ones that trigger you. And so again, like using those micro changes, those little things, and instead of, because like changing that whole big thing is can be daunting, but this list can help you to identify, well, I mean, even something as simple as your heart rate, or where you are, or taking a breath. Those are all little things that help you with empathy, communication, and trustworthiness. I think it also helps you. We talked about this quite a bit in the last couple of episodes. It helps you to not react, and reacting is managing emotions and is not leading. So, yeah, this list helps you to develop those positive things that you can be doing.
So, how important is it to share this personal development plan with others? So, like a team, a mentor, so that you can stay accountable.
Yeah, it's definitely very helpful because it provides accountability for you. I think case in point is we're podcasting about my list. So all of these leadership lessons are my list of all the
Yeah.
things that I've seen in leaders. Like, I don't want to do that. And so what am I going to write? This whole identity and influence podcast has to do with my leadership frustrations list. And not only are we podcasting about it, we're sharing it with everyone that listens. And so, like, I love that you asked that question because this whole podcast has to do with my frustrations list.
You say that what frustrates us and others often lives in us. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, so we've used this line before in this podcast, but we don't, and the line is, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And so what frustrates you says a lot about how you've been programming. So if you see something in someone else or in a situation, it reveals something about yourself.
So, how can leaders take that mirror moment and use it for growth instead of guilt or denial?
Yeah, I think the main reason for the lesson is I don't think we've developed that practice for using that mirror for growth. That's why we're talking about it here. It's not natural or normal to do this kind of work, to like write down the negative stuff and then turn it into something positive and develop a practice out of it. It's much easier to criticize and tear down. But what we're doing is we're taking that list of things that are criticisms and things that, that could easily tear down someone, taking a look at ourselves, that's the mirror part, and then developing practices and developing habits that are positive and helpful for leadership.
So, what does it look like to approach leadership with both humility and at the same time being confident?
These are one of those questions, of like one or the other, right? I think having humility to be better and to grow in your leadership helps us to develop and grow our confidence. So that you need both, right? The humility helps us it puts us in a place to develop and grow. And as we develop and grow, our confidence develops. And then we're not managing feelings, and then we're not reacting to things, which we talk about here is not leadership. We live out of our authentic and unapologetic self.
All right. So, what are your personal development plan final thoughts? What do leaders need to do today to get on this journey and make it happen?
I think no matter where you are in your leadership journey, there's always a next level to get to. And this framework, this exercise helps you to kind of process, how do I get to that next level? And so writing down some of those things that frustrate you, some of those negative things that you see in leaders, and not doing them in your leadership practice really helps you to become a better leader. So yeah, we can all develop and grow still.
Yeah, love it. Well, there you have it. Leadership lesson 27, personal leadership development. If you are not doing it, you need to do it now because you think your people are the problem, but it's not. Just go look in the mirror and you'll see who the problem is. It's always you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, sign up for our free newsletter where we give you all the good stuff. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, Dr. Lem.
Yes, sir. Thank you.